Welcome to Bloody Good Horror, covering the best and worst of the horror genre since Halloween 2007. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello everybody and welcome to another exciting episode of Bloody Good Horror. My name's Eric and I'll be your host for this evening, where we will be reviewing The Blair Witch, the sequel nobody knew about until about a month ago. When I say Blair Witch, I like to say it in like Joe's southern accent. I don't know why. The Blair Witch. I'm the editor-in-chief over at bloodygoodhorror.com. Joining me tonight, first up, king of accents at Bloody Good Horror. He's also the guy who tells us about beer. His name is Joe.
Hey, everybody.
Next up on the show, from Manhattan, New York City, he is the business manager at bloodygoodhorror.com, and his name is Jonathan Schnars.
I never get to go second.
John, are you safe?
You know what's so I don't know, you guys probably don't want a serious answer here, but my office was 3 blocks north of the bomb that actually went off, and the bomb that didn't go off was 1 block north of my office.
That's cool.
So they were kind of like, we were like a sandwich of my office.
Yeah, he was kind of shitty at bombing stuff.
Yeah. John, just so you know, I saw 9/11, so I'm still more traumatized than you.
I mean, I will not argue that with you, Joe, I promise.
That's cool you saw your pipe bomb, but
Next up on the show, perfectly safe because he is in Indiana. He's the co-host of The Instamatic, and he also is a author of horror fiction. His name is Casey.
Hello!
And last up tonight, but certainly not least, the most eccentric member of the Bloody Good Horror crew, we'll call him. He's just an all-around good guy as well, and now beardless for the first time in a long time. His name is Andy.
Feeling real weird, guys. Real weird.
I don't care for it. I don't condone it.
If you've ever heard weird legends from Horror Hound Weekend about like a shirtless guy with a lot of chest hair who looks like Sean William Scott, then this is the guy.
Yep. Funny thing is, all the chest hair is gone now too.
Oh, you were shaving the beard and you just kept going?
Just went straight down.
Yeah.
how far down, Andy?
It just makes sense.
How far down?
Joe, everyone needs a happy trail. Come on.
Oh.
Oh, God.
That was our high
I
school.
wasn't
Already
sure.
gone off the rails here.
I wasn't sure where you're going there, Eric, with the intros, because Andy's now down here with me.
It's true.
That's right. He is
We're like
in Indiana.
neighbors now.
What
I know.
what I also missed is that Andy is co-host of Sophisticult Cinema.
Yep.
The Schnars birthed show about pretentious cult movies.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
birthed it and then quickly tried to abandon it.
Kicked
and
it out of the-
Andy has forbidden it from dying.
kicked it out of the house as soon as
Shelton
it...
and I had a real good conversation about your childhood with our last movie, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, are you not on the episodes anymore, Jim?
I
No.
would say I'm on about half.
As soon as it was old enough to get a job, Schnars booted it out of the house.
Oh,
And I'll tell you what, when we notice when Schnars is on the main show, but not on a Sophisticult that's recording the same week, we notice.
Yeah, I'm sure it's heavily commented upon.
It's just the
Oh,
kind of parenting that Jim Bob can look forward to.
We have a card system, and it gets flipped every time Schnars isn't in there. He's
Yeah.
on purple now.
Very nice. Hey, John.
Christ.
John, there's an update for people
Yeah.
on Patreon.
Ooh, Patreon.
What is
we
Patreon? What is the update?
Eric, so what is Patreon? We should start there. You're right. That's a good question. Patreon is it's a lovely website. It's a lovely startup business. I don't know what you would define it as, but it's a service that we use, and it allows people to support Bloody Good Horror.
Let's call it an internet concern.
An internet concern, yes. It's somewhat like Bloody Good Horror. Could be called an internet concern. But Patreon allows folks to support Bloody Good Horror and in exchange receive additional content. I would say primarily in the form of our classic packs or our classic archive. But you get access to the live stream of the show. You get access to the YouTube videos before they are published publicly. So there's some other stuff. we've got some upcoming announcements probably going out midweek this week, which I guess is like today, but coming up soon. The big announcement though is actually a Patreon announcement. So they enabled a new product feature that actually creates a private RSS feed. So patrons of Bloody Good Horror, if you are listening, you are a patron, you should have gotten an email in the whatever email you use to subscribe to Patreon. Essentially, we enabled the feature yesterday and posted the Something Red episode 10. And what it is essentially just an RSS feed that if you pull it into your podcast reader, whatever app you use to download your podcast, you'll actually just now get those podcasts delivered to you, so you don't have to go through any of the rigmarole of like downloading the episode from Patreon, uploading it to iTunes or whatever you use. Long story short, it should be way easier for you to get the spin-off shows. They should just be showing up in your podcast reader. If they're not, and yesterday was literally the first time we tried this, so maybe give us like one more episode to see how it goes. I actually fired them off like a quick note asking for somewhat of a feature change, and they responded, but I haven't had a chance to get back to them. Yeah, so you should be seeing those in your podcast reader. If you are a Patreon subscriber, go ahead and grab that RSS feed. It should be super useful.
Yeah, we got a guy at Patreon we call, no big deal.
If forced at gunpoint, John, I could not repeat one thing you just said.
Private RSS feed for patrons only, so you can get the Patreon-only content delivered to your RSS reader.
But John, I'm confused. According to Mark, nobody uses RSS feeds anymore.
Well,
I was wondering if that's why this announcement was put on hold here.
You need an RSS feed for podcast delivery, so that is one place that they're.
So what you're saying is it's an essential part of internet content.
Of the podcast ecosystem, I would say maybe.
Yeah.
No.
And like articles that you read every day.
Yes.
Our RSS feeds internet concerns.
It's how the Internet of Things will be delivered to your brain in the future.
I would be concerned if someone didn't use RSS feeds.
So. But yeah, so that's the short-term update. Look for a hot new update from Patreon soon from us.
Sexy. Thank you, Schnars. In the meantime, if you want to find out more info about our current Patreon stuff, patreon.com/bloodygoodhorror, or you can always just go to bloodygoodhorror.com and click from there.
Or tweet us, and then, that'll come to me,
Just
and then
click.
I'll email John. He'll get back to me like a couple hours later.
Joe will find out the link from somebody else.
Yeah. John will explain to me what an RSS feed is.
And all of our lives have meaning again.
I'll email Mark, ask him how we log into the website.
Mark, can you reset my login?
I'll catch up with Andy and ask him what Trello is, or whatever the hell we use.
Why don't you use it?
I don't even know what it is.
I can
never tell what's real and not.
I've been in a long war of attrition at my day job to try to get people to use Trello. I set it up and we've been doing it and everything. But
wow, Eric fighting the Trello battle.
Yeah, it's effective.
What is it?
Never mind. Joe, tell me about rats.
Tell you about what?
You lived in New York City for a while. You know a little something about rats.
Oh man, John, you can probably relate to this. One of the funnest things to do after a night of drinking is wait for the subway to come and just watch the rats scurrying across the subway tracks, going back and forth.
Gross.
And apparently, what is it? Morgan Spurlock, I think, directed this movie. It's
Super Size Me fame.
Yeah. Directed a documentary that we tracked down the trailer of today. I don't know. I just kind of stumbled upon it and sent it to you guys.
It looks amazing.
It does. So it's really about like the rat epidemic. I mean, a lot of the trailer focuses on New York City, but I think they focus on a lot of cities.
It seems kind of more broadly too about like the relationship between rats and humans throughout history and how they've basically been omnipresent, and they are just like the most effective parasites.
I mean, they talk a lot about how like they evolve so quickly, and really just like putting down poison for them like does absolutely nothing, and a lot of them have evolved to like be immune to this poison. And
yeah, it did note on that article that you sent through, Joe, that this is like loosely based on a book that I had actually heard of and I just like have never read, but it looks pretty interesting. It's called Rats: Observations on the History and Habitat of the City's Most Unwanted Inhabitants.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like a pretty well-regarded book, but it's 2005, so it's not new or anything. But it is definitely kind of like a it's there's a lot of science, there's a lot of like sort of anthropology, that's sort of like the human interaction. And I think to Joe's point, it's about like sort of the interaction between rats and the city and the way cities have like structured the breeding and evolutionary development of modern rats.
What's really cool about it is it's kind of being billed as like a horror documentary. Like it's very moody and dark, and like they're very much playing up the kind of, I think, body horror aspect of rats.
Well, it starts with an exterminator who's kind of explaining, his interaction.
It starts with the character from Night Shift, basically, but in real life. I can't remember that guy. It's not Gary Sinise, is it?
I do not remember.
No, it's Brad Dourif. He plays the like Vietnam vet who now is a rat exterminator and has been called into this Have you ever seen Graveyard Shift? It's amazing.
Yeah, not
since it came out on VHS.
But anyway, it's like that guy in real life being interviewed by a documentary crew about killing rats.
But even, I mean, they show him kind of going down in these tunnels and looking for them, and then he talks about how like when rats like they'll lunge at you, and when they get on, like they'll twist. Like it's frightening shit.
The trailer makes it look like to the point of like where I think it actually would be in a lot of people's wheelhouses who are horror fans because of just the creepy nature of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ever since that one scene in Lady and the Tramp, I'll never look at rats the same way.
I was used to run around this reservoir near our old apartment, and one morning, it's like winter morning, so it was like semi-frozen over. There was like kind of little islands of ice, and I see this thing come up out of the water. I'm just jogging. I'm enjoying the sunrise, brisk winter morning, and this thing comes out of the water, and I don't know why I thought this because it doesn't make any sense, but I'm like, oh look, it's an otter. And then as it got halfway up out of the water, I went, oh my, it was like a rat, like this big, just heaving itself up onto the ice, like up out of the water.
You got yourself a muskrat there.
Otters and rats are probably genetically related.
Potentially.
Or
otters
capybaras? Are those the things that are all over Brazil?
Otters are way cuter.
In New Orleans, right? Isn't it like a big problem down there?
Wait, what? Capybaras?
No, they're like
what am I thinking
they're
of?
like South America.
What did I think? There's like something that's
You're
like
thinking,
an epidemic
you're
in New
thinking
Orleans.
murder.
See, you guys can talk shit about there being nothing but
Look this up.
You guys could talk shit about there being nothing but corn silos here, but we don't have giant fucking rats.
What is it? A nutrient? Is that a thing? A nutrient?
Nutrium.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
it's
the
that,
one.
You definitely have rats. I'm sure they're
yeah.
probably
We have rats, but they're not the size of large marsupials.
they're like
we just have
heartier.
we have 40-pound raccoons that feast on like fast food. That's what we have.
Casey has like cute little rats that live under the barn in the back. That's basically.
Yeah, you guys ever see Charlotte's Web animated movie? It's like
exactly.
Templeton's everywhere.
Yeah,
Exactly.
That's disgusting.
but Andy's right though, because we're full of the state's full of modern campgrounds where old ladies go and like to feed the cats when they're out there feeding raccoons, so they're all like 50, 60 pounds.
Oh God. So the new thing they're doing in Boston is they're using dry ice to kill rats, because what they're doing is they're finding these little enclosed spaces where they breed, and then they just throw a bunch of dry ice in there, and then as it dissipates, it suffocates them. But it's not poison, so it doesn't like poison the ground or anything. But apparently it's like super effective. But then you have big creepy holes full of dead rats you have to clean out.
Yeah, extra points for spookiness.
But it's apparently actually like more humane considered, because they basically just fall asleep and pass out.
I blame
this is
us.
dark.
We invented
Rats.
pizza. We brought it upon ourselves.
Anyway, the movie itself is called Rats, and it's directed by Morgan Spurlock. And if you are interested, you should check it out. It looks kind of cool.
Well, it's being released on Discovery Channel. It's like playing a couple of like festivals and stuff, but it looks like it's actually gonna like premiere on Discovery Channel with a small theatrical release.
It did screen as a part of TIFF Midnight
There
Madness.
you go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge Super Size Me fan. I think that guy's, he gets. Actually, it's maybe an appropriate topic for tonight's show, but I think he gets pigeonholed a little bit. But obviously, he's super talented. So.
Speaking of pigeonholing, do you think he'll take a rat and put it in one of those bell jars and see how long it takes it to deteriorate?
Oh Jesus,
Just a
that's
lie.
my nightmare.
Just a live rat. I like it. Or he feeds a live rat at McDonald's for a year, and then he puts it in a bell jar.
Every time the rat asks for supersize, he has to give it to him.
Or
All
what if
right,
it's like
Ratty, here you go.
what if it's like a bonsai rat where he puts a rat in a jar and just feeds it until it forms into the shape of the jar?
Oh, like they do
Joe.
with pumpkins at Disney World.
Joe, speaking of waking nightmares, what are we drinking tonight while we review The Blair Witch?
I don't know if I agree with that segue, but
I do.
but I'll take it. We are drinking a beer from the good folks at Biloba. Biloba.
Bilbo.
Bilbo Baggins.
Is
Biloba.
Joe having a fucking aneurysm?
It's ginkgo biloba.
Yeah, it is actually. Their little symbol is the biloba plant or the leaf. So I think you're right. Biloba Brewing Company up in Brookfield, Wisconsin, which, as I understand it, is in the middle of nowhere. And the chances of you guys finding this beer are slim to none. So sit down and enjoy.
Says
It is
you.
a suburb of Milwaukee if you're ever there.
Yeah. But this beer is their night out, which makes sense for this movie because it takes place at night.
And it's out.
And it's a Russian Imperial Stout. Comes in at about 13% alcohol, so that's your big boy. It's aged in bourbon barrels, which normally I'm not a huge fan of, but this one I think is really sort of a smooth drink. It doesn't have sort of that hard whiskey flavor, which I know a lot of people enjoy. So, you might like bourbon barrel beers, but
I do.
me, I enjoy a little bit more of a smooth flavor, which I thought this one had. And it's very good. Their website is atrocious, so I'm not going to bother giving it to you. But apparently they're in the process of expanding, so I think folks in the Midwest at least should be able to find their beers a little more readily.
Joe, I'm impressed you go to their website every week and you don't just Google it and then give the URL.
Oh, hey, no, I look.
That's impressive.
Consummate
yeah.
professional.
I think I mentioned, so 13% alcohol, so it's up there. Comes in like a 22-ounce bomber, so you can have one of these by yourself and start to feel pretty good. And yeah, I haven't had a ton of the other stuff, but this one was really good, so I assume other ones are. Did I mention? So I mentioned this is a stout. So the flavors really are sort of that like sort of barrel whiskey, but you definitely get like a lot of coffee in this also, which is what I really enjoyed. So if you happen to stumble upon it or any of their other stuff, I suggest you pick it up.
Great. Thank you for that, Joe. That's the beer recommendation, something you get here every week in the show. Now, let's take a quick break so that we can discuss The Blair Witch.
I feel like I'm dying inside. I feel like Nev Campbell in Scream 2. She thinks she can go off to college and be happy. And then the murderer comes back. Starts killing off all of her friends. Learned a lot of lessons from that movie. This is just one of them.
Greetings, gentle folk. This is James Duval from Donnie Darko, May, and Sushi Girl, and you are listening to BloodyGoodHorror.com.
This is it, Jennifer. Your big breaking TV. Come to prime time, bitch. Main feature.
And we're back. Joe, I gotta say, even in the grand pantheon of Joe dances, that was pretty good.
I love the stand-up desk.
That was pretty good. Yeah, you really just you got all the way down
Felt good.
into it.
Yeah.
It was nice. Hey, John.
Eric.
Did the explosion knock any words out of your head, or are we good?
I was thinking about it as I was researching for the show today. After 400 episodes, I'm running short. We might be out of words. I think we've reached the end of the dictionary.
You know why?
John, I'm 200 plus beers.
Yeah, you know what? There's way less of beers.
We've had an explosion of craft breweries around this country, and so there is a lot of
Also,
And every one of these beers I have tried personally.
I
Open up a goddamn dictionary.
I gave Cece no warning last week, and she came up with an amazing word. So
Yeah, all right. She, sometimes maybe she's better than me, Eric. What do you want me to say?
Are you really saying there's no word this week?
No, I have a word.
all right, John Schnars.
So today's word.
Nope.
Yep.
Have you heard any music yet? No,
No, I
you
haven't.
you have not. John Schnars, you went to Duke. Please bring us the word of the day. Now you may go.
I appreciate the Duke plug. It was great. You snuck it in there. So today's word, Eric, is caricature. That is Caricature. A picture, description, or imitation of a person or thing in which certain striking characteristics are exaggerated in order to create a comic or grotesque effect. It can also be used as a verb, meaning to make or give a comically or grotesquely exaggerated representation. And it comes from the Latin caricare.
Oh.
That was a Latin pronunciation.
That
You
was
guys probably didn't
100% not
It's
correct.
pronounced karate.
Yeah, karate.
So it actually the Latin root means something akin to charge, as in load or exaggerate. And that eventually became caricature. Came to us through the Italian and eventually the French.
And why is that our word?
So I was thinking about the Blair Witch, and I was thinking about a lot of the symbols and or sort of like visual elements, especially from the first film, that are sort of pulled in here. And the most common or like the one that comes most readily to mind is the sort of like triangle humanistic symbol of that hangs in the tree. Yeah, and so is it a caricature? Sort of, maybe. I don't know how striking some of the characteristics are.
So I thought for sure you were going with this film as a caricature of the original film. Which I think actually works a little better.
I mean, that now you're editorializing, Eric, and I don't appreciate it.
I didn't say it was bad.
Some would say he's improving on your half-ass effort.
Oh, come on. I started with the thing in the tree, and then I was like, I got to come up with a word that I haven't used. That's the key, Joe.
How would you know that? You don't have a spreadsheet.
Pretty sure.
Ew.
Pretty sure. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, 0 for 1. John, why don't you try synopsizing the movie? I'm just joshing you, Schnars. Welcome back.
It's great to be here, guys.
Welcome back to the show.
The Blair Witch, would you like me to describe?
Yes, please.
The Blair Witch. Well, it's just Blair Witch, I should say. This film, directed by Adam Wingard and Simon Barrett, who most recently collaborated on The Guest, which you can find in our back catalog. Highly regarded, I would say, by the Bloody Good Horror crew. It looks like their next upcoming thing together is actually a remake of I Saw the Devil, which we should maybe come back and talk about. That's a deep cut Bloody Good Horror film. But
he did Your Next also. I think that's important to bring up, didn't he?
Yeah,
Wingard?
Your Next. He's been heavily involved in the VHS series. Yeah, ABCs of Death, at least the first one. Yeah, I mean, those are sort of like the big things that folks would know. This movie was originally sort of being billed as The Woods, and I mean, it's been sort of in production for a while. Like, we'd seen some trailers even under the title The Woods, and I guess it was probably like 2 months ago that it was sort of revealed as a sequel to The Blair Witch. The film very much sort of picks up from the original in that the main character, James, is the brother of Heather from the original film. He is sort of obsessed with his sister's disappearance, which happened when he was like 4 years old, I think he says. And this film is told through documentary footage that his friend Lisa is putting together, sort of to document his experience and to document him sort of coming to terms with his sister's disappearance. And the way that they're going to do that is by traveling to Burkittsville, Maryland, site of said witchery, and to sort of explore the woods. They get sort of clued into at least the starting place by a YouTube video that is uploaded by a guy named Lane, who says he found it, and it purports to show sort of the inside of this sort of Blair Witch house, which had never been seen or never, like, there had been all these search parties. No one ever saw it, but, you know, there was like this belief on James's part that it did exist, and this tape sort of confirmed that. And so he sort of sets out into the woods. He brings his friends Ashley and Peter as well as Lisa. The sort of like key difference, I would say, from the first one is that, you know, now whatever 17 years later, well, and it's actually set in 2014, so it's meant to be exactly 15 years later. They've got some pretty badass video equipment. So the video footage is all pretty high quality. They use sort of these ear cameras to get very much sort of like first person perspective. And each of them is sort of wearing one of these cameras. Lisa, who's sort of the documentary filmmaker here, or, you know, student of some kind, she has like a pretty nice looking DSLR, like high def point and shoot thing that she's using to shoot some video. They're sort of like much better resourced to do this type of thing. They also have a drone that they're going to use to survey the woods.
You gotta have a drone.
I mean, it was a little weird because when they tried to use the drone, it like could go 100 meters up in the air, and that wasn't quite high enough that you could really see anything other than like a shitload of trees.
Like the tops of trees.
And they didn't really. You know,
Yes.
I was surprised. I was waiting for like a drone-centric scare, and I mean, I guess they don't really do it in the way that I expected.
Yes, agreed. It does, like, whatever. The drone does end up playing some part in a somewhat dramatic sequence, but
it drones.
There's some drone noises.
There's definitely some droning going
on. Yeah, I mean, so like, I don't know. We can get into sort of the specifics, but essentially they head out into the woods. They land at a campsite. They stay one night, and essentially as they try to exit the woods, like, things start to go a little sideways on them. And they introduce some new sort of elements to the mythology, or sort of, I would say, clarify some of the things that happen in the previous film with, like, quote unquote new rules to the way things work in this Burkittsville woods area. Things with Lane and Talia, who are sort of the two wacky locals that are very interested in the Blair Witch. At first they suspect them, and then sort of prove that they're staging some of this stuff. And Lane sort of insists that he's staging it to kind of keep them interested and keep them exploring. It very quickly sort of like pivots to, yes, they might have been doing that, but like things are still like really fucked up and dark. And yeah, people start dying,
literally and figuratively.
Hey Joe,
Sir,
tell me a little bit your experience with the first film, and then kind of leading into this, what you thought.
Well, the first one came out, I want to say I was a senior in college, and going to like an art school where there weren't like film students, but there were definitely kids who were like the nerdy film guys. Like, nobody would shut the hell up about this goddamn movie. So I want to say when I first saw it, I was already kind of sick of it. But I mean, I enjoyed it for what it was. Like, it definitely sort of, wasn't the first found footage movie, but it definitely sort of thrust it into the loins of the mainstream. But I want to say, like, when I first saw it, it didn't do a ton for me. Like, I appreciated it, but I didn't love it. I think some of the other guys, we'll talk about how you guys really enjoyed it. For me, it was kind of like, it was entertaining, but it wasn't, didn't change my life. So I went into this with like surprisingly high expectations because I thought the trailer looked pretty good. And I will 100% agree that this is really just sort of a rehashing of the first one with, louder jump scares and, everything else just kind of amped up. But I ended up really enjoying it, especially like the last probably 35 minutes really like scared the shit out of me. Like, to the point where I was like looking at my watch like every couple minutes, like I just want this to be over because I feel like I'm gonna throw up. And even like I got in the car after it and I called Leslie, my wife, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like I don't enjoy this. Like I don't feel good. Like I feel like I've just spent the last 40 minutes like trying to hold in vomit from shooting out of my face. Like I think I might be done. But and then like you kind of realize like, well, that is a sign of probably a good horror movie if it left you that uncomfortable. So, I'll say at the end of the day, I enjoyed this a fair amount.
Yeah, John Schnars.
I was really interested in the Blair Witch when it came out. I was probably sucked into a lot of the like early internet marketing stuff. I don't know if you guys remember, like there was like all kinds of like they had like some websites with like purported, you know, real footage, or it was the kind of shit that like nowadays we expect, but back then was like still pretty new.
Well, there's also like the infancy of the internet. Like everybody was still on
Yes.
dial-up. Like,
Yes.
you know, making a website took effort.
Sure.
So it was
No,
it was
and like
impressive.
I like my parents, like God bless them, were like early internet adopters. So like I had the internet in my home, and like I was like fucking doing like this is what I was doing with it. I was like reading about the Blair Witch on like AOL fucking chat groups or
I
something.
was trying to pick up the ladies.
No, I mean it's the you can never recreate what happened around that original film because it was like a special time in the internet's innocence as well. Like, and that's never gonna come back.
Well, so then the funny part of all this is that I didn't actually see it in the theater. So, you know, and like it was just whatever confluence of events. Like I just didn't get out to see it. I ended up catching it once it hit VHS. And I think I've talked about on the show. Like I worked at a video store, so this was like a popular title at the video store in like 2000, 2001. I watched it at the video store. I like, you know, I had seen it. I saw it maybe once or twice, you know, where I was like sitting down to watch it and then, you know, would play it in the background at the video store.
You watched it at the video store? What?
Well, because like there was like good, like sort of like Friday night, Saturday night, like people would walk in, like ambiance. Like we were an independent store, so we could do whatever the hell we wanted.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, we would have the volume not like crazy high or anything because we don't need people being like, "What the fuck is all this yelling?" Yeah, so I liked it. I'm sort of somewhat in the same boat as Joe, where like, it was super interesting. I think I respect it more as like a historical sort of like piece of filmmaking than anything else at this point. But I went into this, I would say, with pretty high hopes. I enjoyed it. Like I thought the amount of jump scares was like sort of embarrassing, like and like not necessary because like having a fucking camera pointing into the woods is scary. Like you do not need to do a jump scare.
We can talk about it, but the main point is exactly that. The original film wasn't about jump scares. It was about the scariness of being alone in the woods.
Yeah. And they hit some of that. So like I give them points for like understanding it and doing it. I don't know why they made some of the choices that they made around, I mean, like the jump scares, for lack of a better, like there's some other stuff. I mean, some of the character stuff is like a little goofy, even in a universe of like somewhat goofy character stuff among sort of found footage films. But I don't know. I was like sufficiently freaked out. I thought the way that it sort of moved toward a conclusion, like I was entertained. I don't know.
Yeah. Casey.
So I was a total mark for the whole marketing scheme for the original Blair Witch project. Colleen and I, my wife, got both bought into it pretty hard, into the rumors that came out ahead of it. I heard about it word of mouth through college interns at work. They started buzzing about it, and I started looking up more into it online, like John was talking about, and you start stumbling on these sites. And I'll fully admit that I had a period where before it came out, where I was wondered, is this legit or not? Because I wasn't that deep into my nerddom at the time as I am now. But it's something, we got a hold of a bootleg copy before it hit theaters. We watched it a number of times there, which I would say it's far more effective watching it grainy on a computer screen than that original one. It really added to the mythos, so to speak. And once it hit the theaters, we ended up loving it just as much. And so it's been one that I've always considered one of my favorites. Going into this one, once they made the big reveal that The Woods was going to be the Blair Witch sequel, I was pretty hyped. Probably a strong chance that I did overhype myself for it, but it took me right back to that nostalgia from the first movie. So going through this movie, there's a lot of stuff happening in this movie that they added story-wise and mythos-wise, around the Blair Witch and things like that I really dug. There's parts of this movie that I thought was kind of slow and drug on and kind of brought it down for me. But part of that is buying so hard into the nostalgia for the original it was hard for me to separate the two.
Andy.
So I think
sorry.
that created a definite problem, which is obviously my own problem. But it seems like there's a long way to get to where the good stuff happens in this movie compared to the first one. Because the first one, like as Eric said, it's not about the jump scares and things like that. It's all about getting lost in the woods and watching their own personal terror kind of grow slowly with them as they get further and deeper into the woods and everything, where you didn't have that here because they kind of took a day hike, camped, and goofy shit happened, even though felt like it took a long time to get there.
Yeah. Andy.
So I actually never saw the original Blair Witch Project until like last year. I watched it as part of like a 31 Days of Horror for like Halloween. And honestly, like part of the reason why I did not watch it when it originally came out is because that was when my horror nerdery was still in its infancy, and I still like couldn't quite bring myself to like watch scary things.
Real question: were you in your infancy when the original Blair Witch came out? How old are you?
No, I was not. I was like, how old was I then? I was like fucking like 8. No.
So
No,
okay.
shut up. You shut your mouth.
It was 98.
98. Yeah, I don't know. I can't do math right now. No, yeah,
What
I was
year were you born, Andy?
I was 14. 14. That's what it is.
Okay, got it.
That's the number.
Okay, so that's. I mean, you couldn't have seen it in the theater for sure.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
So like this was still at that point where like I was legitimately like freaked out by potentially like something being real. So I think I like actually like deliberately distanced myself from it. A lot of this has to do with the fact that my house was literally surrounded by corn and forests, so it's like, nah, I'm not doing this thing right now. So yeah, I watched it very recently last year, and I ended up really enjoying it. I think what everyone like spoke to on the roundtable here actually like still hits really hard. I think the dynamic between the actors is really solid, and I think even though like it definitely wears its age on its sleeves, I think the fact that part of it is 16 millimeter mixed with the DV actually does some really interesting things, which is actually something that we can kind of talk about with like this iteration and why it like might not be as effective with like such high quality visuals. But as far as like this film goes, you know, I'm pretty much on board with everybody else. I would probably say that I ended up liking it more than what I thought I was going to. And I think a lot of that does have to do with the personality of the filmmakers involved. And also, like, I was just kind of going into it for the ride. I kind of already heard that it was getting some pretty bad publicity. And so that kind of colored my perception of what it was that I was walking in to see.
Yeah.
Only downside was I saw it in one of those bullshit recliner theaters. So they
You watch yourself around.
You're just like,
Why is that bullshit?
You're just sitting in someone else's sweat, and your legs are sweaty.
Thank you. I was just saying that last week.
Eric was talking about that 2 weeks ago. I don't understand.
Oh no, yeah,
naked legs touching seats.
I heard Eric, and I was like, yes, preaching to the choir.
What are you wearing to the movies?
Well, I got a bike everywhere, and like every movie theater is like 7 miles away, so it's like fuck.
So you're part of the problem, really.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's your sweat that everyone is sitting in.
That's hard. That's hard.
I went to a theater that had those, but it wasn't for poor people, so I assume everybody drove there.
Okay, Mr. Suburbia, aren't you cool?
I am.
Okay. Yeah, I think that this movie is fine, and that, like, I want to preface everything else I say by saying it's fine. I think if it wasn't called The Blair Witch, I'd be coming out of this saying like, hey, that was a pretty fun little, like, you know, found footage trifle, I guess we could call it.
It would have been a fun homage.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think like it does some interesting things. There's some decent scares, but it's a sequel to The Blair Witch. And, you know, like, I think that I personally have to give a pretty large grain of salt. The Blair Witch, I was like 17 when I saw it, and so I think it was one of the first horror films I was able to like really go see in the theater, and so it was kind of mine in a way, if that makes sense. Like, it was sort of our generation's horror film in a lot of ways. And I watched it every year multiple times since then. I know a lot about it. I've written about it in the past before. And I think like I find this movie really baffling as a Blair Witch sequel because I think that it doesn't seem to like fully grasp what made the original scary, which is what John's talking about staring into the woods, being lost, being hopeless. You know, the original is like raw dog ass independent filmmaking, and it could be in a lot of ways because it was sort of the American proto version of this found footage thing. It'd been done before, obviously, but like it really in a lot of ways is a lot of people's basis for when they go and make found footage. So what you have here though is like, and we were discussing this pre-show, we now have distilled the essence of the found footage film down into this little like, concentrated syrup, and we've refined it so much that it's so clean now, and like we do it with cameramen instead of the actors filming, and like we know how to engineer fake movie jump scares with it. And so like that's what you get here. You know, you get a lot of aggressive jump scares. You get everything is really clean looking. There's not a lot of effort to make it feel as genuine as the original film. You know, like the most intense parts of the original film are like character moments where they are sitting and talking about the fact that like they're never going to go back and see their loved ones again because they've been wandering around the woods for 3 days, or they're like longingly talking about the types of food that they, are missing. Like those are like these really powerful character moments when you go back to that film. And this movie just doesn't have any of that stuff. Like the characters, I actually really liked the main lead guy who's like Heather's brother.
Yeah.
But I just like the actor. I'm not sure his character has a lot. I mean, he's an EMT, I guess. He's probably the most well-rounded person, I think, of everyone.
I mean, I think the Peter character, his like best friend, is the other one who gets like at least cursory characterization, you know?
And he's a very particular like genre type too, like Peter as the character.
I guess.
And so I felt like that was actually kind of like something that the filmmakers went out of their way to be like, oh yeah, this guy has very particular reasons about why he is the way he is.
Overall, I'm just confused by this film. Like, why do this now? And if you're going to do it now, why this like just disaster of a PR campaign where you didn't tell us what it was until a month before? That's dumb. If you're out there listening and you came up with that idea, you are a dummy. Why like, okay, hire Wingard. He's kind of a hot hand right now. I get it. But like Ed Sanchez is out there making kick-ass independent films right now. He, stuff like Altered and Exists, which by the way is a found footage movie and is as good, if not better than this. So like, why not hire him and then have this big build-up marketing campaign of like from the people who brought you the original? You know what I mean? Like it seems like such a simple slam dunk idea, and yet you come up with this, which is just this sort of like, I think it was rightly dismissed by a lot of people because like there's nothing interesting here, right? They didn't take it so far in one direction away from the original that it's interesting, and they didn't do enough of a good homage to the original to where I'm like, yeah, like really feel like this is Blair Witch. That said, like it has its moments. I think the idea that at a certain point the sun never comes up is like kind of genius and really just really plays on the dementia and confusion in the original film and just like kind of goes a step further. You see the witch in glimpses, and I think like that stuff is really cool. I think there's an argument to be made about, not showing your monster, but like this is the third movie and you're doing this in 2016. Like to me, I'm like, show me the monster.
Can I argue that they should show me a better monster then?
I thought it was kind of cool.
I don't know. I was just like, I don't really want
it was like Pumpkinhead
kind of Doug Jones character like chasing me through the woods, I mean, like
did you want like a pointy hat and like a full on
well, I mean, like actually that's a good point. Like to borrow a comparison, I mean, like let's talk about the other witch movie that came out this year, The Witch. I mean, like, and that's a movie that shows it's
the witch.
You wanted a talking goat. I get it.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted Black Phillip. But that's a movie that like shows its antagonist like a lot.
But I think that this design, if you go back to our episode a few weeks ago where we were kind of joking about the old Todd McFarlane designs, like it actually hews pretty close to those. Like if you go back and look at the original concepts of, and my understanding was they had originally planned to show it some in the original movie and just weren't happy with what they had. But
which I guess I'll give it that, but like at the same time, it's like I just as a viewer, I just didn't find it that interesting. I guess
I found it interesting because with the glimpses that they showed us, I think they did a good job of setting us up for those glimpses. And there was in the original
Particularly the
movie.
first one, yeah.
In the original movie, I don't remember them explaining a whole lot about the stick figures that would show up in the woods, what the origin was of them, why they were building them. It may be, fog of memory, but in this one, they made a good, I thought they did a good job of explaining why these stick figures that, are become iconic for Blair Witch are now out there, because they talked about how they tied her to a tree, left her to die of exposure, and then they throw in the bit in there too about they tied rocks to her arms and legs too, so she's basically hanging on on a rack, and they left her out there to die for exposure. So once we get that glimpse, she fits that description pretty well.
I might I guess I might just compare this to something like The Evil Dead, right? Like the Evil Dead remake. You know when you're watching a movie and the filmmakers have like a deep reverence for the material that they're riffing off of, and whether they just hew straight to like full on homage or they try to do something different, like in The Evil Dead, I think you feel that. Like I just didn't really feel it here. I felt like they were just sort of doing a kind of weak impression of the first film. And again, like this is all like kind of touchy feely. Like I have a lot of nostalgia, so
Yeah.
I do want to make sure I say that. But I am seeing a lot of other people with similar sentiments of like, what was this thing?
So I like Andy mentioned this, and I will play defense for the new film in this regard because I somewhat agree. I don't know to what extent I agree, so you guys tell me. But I thought
I'll tell you.
the direction was actually solid. Like I think Wingard gets how to structure sequences. Like I was legit scared at several points during this movie.
I don't think I
Like I was
was.
nauseous at the end. Like,
But like nauseous, like in a good way or bad way? I guess.
well,
I mean, I think
like
I
the
think,
fact
like-
there was, and I want to say like specifically like the end where they're in the house, like that was some of like the most tense moments I think I've watched in a movie probably this year.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. Now, some
it
of them
was
were
like
a little silly. Like to me, the house, I was kind of like, just don't fucking. I mean, at this point, like you kind of have to go in the house. Like, what else are they gonna do? I guess. But
I mean, you've come this far. I will say too, I really liked the little bit about the tree being there that they had seen earlier in the film.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
And it moved.
To me, like once we get in the house, at least at that point, we're going kind of batshit, and at that point, that kind of won me over on this movie. Like, I think if the last 20 minutes hadn't been as solid as they were, I'd be more upset.
we're gonna need to talk about the ending at some point. So like, I don't know if you guys want to
I
get into
think
it.
just one more point I want to make, and Eric, you mentioned it. Like, I loved the fact that they came up with a way where it was just night constantly.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the thing with the original and the thing with this one at the beginning, there's these really tense moments at night, but then it's light out, and like, okay, well, I can relax now because nothing's going to happen during the day, because they even set it up that like only this stuff goes down like at night. Then they get to a point where they're like, it's been night for 5 days, and at that point, I think there was like 4 people in the theater. I think I legitimately said out loud like, oh fuck, like
Yeah.
It just makes it feel very oppressive in a really smart way. Like
there's no safety anymore. Like it's not gonna end.
and it's not necessarily like too much of a leap from the original film, because literally like there's clearly bending of like space-time going on in the original
Yeah.
film to confuse them,
That 5 days thing that Joe mentioned, that's the thing that I ended up liking the most about this movie, because they stuck to a lot of the mythos that they set up in the original movie, and they added to it. And some of it they even explained in this movie, and then they added new mystery to it. So like the whole thing with Josh standing in the corner at the end of the first movie, that kind of got explained about how you're not supposed to look at it, stuff like that. So because of something that Rustin Parr had said when he was murdering children in his house. But then they add in this stuff with this weird time dilation and stuff, and I thought that was fantastic, because like in the part that Joe's talking about, when the guy said the sun hasn't come up for 5 days, when he first gets there, he asks the other people, he says, when did you see us last? And they said, earlier today. To the other guy, he's been wandering in the woods for 5 days.
Yeah,
There's all sorts of weird shit that pops up in that. And
that was kind
it
of a
even
cool
comes
little
into
moment.
like the tape that they find that leads them out there. It plays into that too. It's
Mm-hmm.
pretty interesting once it starts to suck you in.
That was kind of a cool little moment when they run into them later in the movie and he's like, how long? When did you see me last?
Yeah.
That guy in general, that was like super a little goofy for me.
Who
Well, I
the
mean, like, I
Lane
don't-
character?
Yeah, I don't quite understand why they built him up to have like a stars and bars flag in his house, and that had nothing.
Dude,
and no
I have to say,
consequences to either of the black characters in this film.
Best intentional laugh of the movie though is the characters walk in his house in the beginning, and the camera's on the black dude, and he looks over at the Confederate flag, and he just throws shade to the camera like, "Are you fucking
Well,
serious?"
it
And
was a
keeps
little
walking.
ridiculous to me that when they stepped outside, he
so
didn't
funny.
use the word racist. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, how do you not
That's
freak
true.
out
Yeah,
more?
I agree. Like he was arguing of not taking this guy with him, and
The
at no
look-
point did he say like, "There's a goddamn Confederate flag in his
Yeah,
living
like,
room."
I will
Yeah.
say the
Racist.
look really made me laugh. Something quick too, like, so his girlfriend gets this weird thing where she cuts her foot early on and gets some kind of weird infection, and then some weird body horror stuff starts to happen. I don't know if it's anybody else, but it felt totally out of place in this
I didn't
movie. to
follow
me.
it, and I also thought it was ridiculous when she started like scaling a tree like later on.
To me, it was like that again. I just like that didn't feel like something that would happen in a Blair Witch movie to me.
Oh,
and I
yeah.
get they're trying
Well,
to do
this-
something different,
yeah.
but like it didn't feel like it should be in this movie.
At the for trying not to get too risky though, would you guess that it grew there from the original injury, or was that a new injury when she sat down on the log? And
No,
was
I think it was
checking things
completely psychological.
out?
You know,
Yeah.
So-
I mean, like, well, I think that this is like this is a very good instance of where I feel like this film kind of falls apart a little bit, and that's in its combination of what it's trying to do with different like horror subgenres, right? Because we have not only the the structure of a found footage film, but then we also have like kind of like a slasher group of characters. Like all
Yeah.
of the characters in here are like
It's
all
a
slasher.
it's straight up
stereotypes.
slasher for a lot of it. Like literally people
Right,
wandering
yeah.
off and getting killed. It's like kind of ridiculous
Yeah.
at some point.
And then there's like body horror, and then there's witchy shit. And I was like thinking, witchy shit. And I was thinking about like Winger as a filmmaker, and if we like think about his filmography, like not too many of his films are like straight up scary.
They're-
Like
yeah.
they're all really well. I mean, for the most part, they're very well structured. They're very tense. Like You're Next and The Guest, they're both films that kind of dabble in horrific elements and like stuff that's splattery, but they're not necessarily like jump out scares. And I feel like he doesn't quite know how to scare people, and I think that that's why there are so many jump scares in this.
Literally, there's a moment, like, if you ever find yourself writing this into a script, stop. Where one character scares another character by accident, which is really a big, giant jump scare for the audience, and then the other character goes, stop doing that. That means you should literally stop doing that because that's a stupid, hacky cliche.
Yeah. I mean, like, and there are moments too where you can tell he's like starting to build tension, and we start figuring out where the camera placement is. And like, so for example, there's that one camera that's like mounted on a tree, and it's like black and white, and it's more night vision, and you expect something to come from that because there's so much negative space. So it's like classic kind of Carpenter setup. But then like nothing happens with it, which I get is like that's a bit of a misdirection like on his part. But at the same time, there's never a moment where it felt like the found footage aesthetic like felt confident enough with what it's showing you. And I think like the addition of like the earpiece cameras is actually a crutch that lean on almost like too much, because that's almost them trying to do an over the shoulder shot without having to do that.
Yeah, that was kind of them. Because I know when we've talked about found footage movies a lot in the past, and I know, John, you like to, this always sets you off with found footage movies, but they're always, they lose you in how they set up those cameras. So like Andy said, I think they use it as a crutch. They slap these earpiece cameras on so they don't have to come up with an excuse for you to have that view at all.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you guys, and like about that in particular. To me, I'm curious if we're like moving into a new phase of found footage where it's actually going to continue, like increasingly look more slick like this. I mean, I don't even know that I like disliked it as a choice. I was okay with it. It's just it's a different type of film than say I don't know, like, I mean, the VHS films, for example, which are
Well,
like intentionally retrograde, right?
Yeah, you can really argue though that they did make some smart choices here because they grew the technology with the time that the movie was set in.
Yeah, exactly.
Well-
I mean, it's teed up perfectly in that regard.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like the most obvious thing in the world. Like, you sit around a table writing the script and somebody goes, dude, I know, fucking drones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not about just the drones. It's about like the quality of the cameras that they're using overall.
Sure.
It's
Did
about.
you guys notice that and I did like this little touch, the creepy internet guy, his camera was older and you could tell that his footage was grainier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a DV.
He even comments on that
Yeah.
during the movie too.
Well, so Yeah, I mean, that was the other thing I wanted to come back to was the tape that he finds and like, do we want to get into somewhat spoiler territory here?
I think we should at this point.
Yeah, go ahead, because then
So
we're heading towards the end here.
yeah, so the tape that he finds, like, it does loop right back around, right? Like that tape is the end of this. But maybe I missed where the cameras got switched out. Like, did she end up with his camera?
Wait, the tape that who finds?
So the tape that gets uploaded to YouTube in the beginning, that sort of like starts the entire thing.
That draws them out there.
Yeah,
that was a different. I think that was something they faked or something, wasn't it?
No, that was the
No.
tape that they claimed to find, and then because you see the thing that makes the Peter think that it's Heather is because you see the girl walk up the stairs and she looks in the mirror and she's all bloody, and he's like, "I'm pretty sure that's my sister." And then later on, when we get to the house, and the girl who is shooting the documentary, it's actually her in the mirror.
Yeah, that same exact shot happened.
Oh, that totally. I think
So it's part of the time loop.
Yeah,
totally.
It wraps
checked out
back
on that
around.
one.
But I do think she ended up picking that camera up at one point because
She must have.
I think it was when she came out of the tunnels and Lane was there.
Yeah, and she stabs him.
Yes, I think she picked it up then because that was the only thing that had a flashlight.
In case you haven't seen the movie yet, that's what happened.
We talk spoilers.
By the way,
We should mention spoilers.
I have a
so
history
sorry.
question. Maybe Andy knows this. They're talking about in the beginning of the movie how there's like there's like tunnels under the house. It's like an underground railroad. And I was like, was the Underground Railroad actually underground? Wasn't
No.
that
I don't
like
think
a,
they said it was the
wasn't that a
Underground Railroad. They
metaphor?
said it
No,
was
they said it was like part of the Underground Railroad or
Oh,
something.
did they?
No,
I thought they said it
no,
was
they said
like-
like an underground like the Underground Railroad, which and I was like,
I
I
thought
don't-
they were
God,
insinuating
actually,
that it's like
underground.
part of the Underground Railroad.
For whatever reason, those tunnels were there. That was the scariest part of that goddamn movie for me.
it was a smart
Yeah.
choice, I think. Yeah.
I mean, like that's I don't know. That goes back to like this, kind of like I feel like mishandling of like the genre elements a little bit. I mean, like that stuff is very affecting.
Mhm.
You know, like that last 20 minutes, and I think like this is something that people are kind of confusing a little bit. Is this idea of being nauseous for the camera's sake versus nauseous for what the filmmakers are trying to go for? And I think that that's like a really interesting question that like no one really has the answers to yet. Like, for example, like what you guys were talking about, like I get really bad motion sickness, and I believe Colin, who like wrote the review for bloodygoodhorror.com, check it out. He also gets really bad motion sickness.
Nice work.
I do. But neither he or I like were motion sick watching this movie. And so
It's just so refined, like yeah.
Yeah. I did
No,
think it was
yeah.
pretty tough in the beginning. Like I had trouble.
It's like
Yeah.
it's like the refined sugar version of found footage.
Well, I mean, like, and that's not a bad thing either, though. Like, I think that just shows like the assuredness of the
Well,
filmmaking.
I think that on a certain scale, it's not a bad thing, but there is an argument to be made. Like at some point, like, are you not filtering out what makes those films interesting?
Oh, sure.
But you
no,
could
that's-
also tie that into the whole technology thing because they said it in 2014, so the technology's grown. A lot of those cameras have built-in stabilization and shit. So
The technology
technically-
has grown, but it doesn't matter. If you had lay people out with this kind of equipment just shooting whatever happened to them, it would never look this clean.
So my other question, and this like kind of drove me crazy, very much in this vein.
Oh, geez.
Why the fuck was the image getting all distorted? Are we supposed to believe that like the Blair Witch had like distortion powers over the image? Like,
She's shifting time. It's gonna
Yeah.
fuck with your tubes, brother.
I mean, I guess,
You're-
but it was just like very bizarre, like the type of
You know, like
distortion that was
your
there.
your rods and your cones and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Well,
the
like,
Warrens in the Conjuring movies have proven to us that ghosts fuck with electrical shit.
It's a good point.
goes fucking fuck.
You,
Well, I think the
you
other-
gotta say.
I believe everything Ed Warren tells me.
Well, kind of what you were talking about too, Schnars, with that like idea of like the images grainy and getting like chopped up. That's also like an essential quality of like found footage too, because they're films that inherently play with time way more than most other genres do, because they're all about time and like finding those products.
Yup.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm distracted by sirens.
Oh boy.
So, spoiler alert, in the end, everyone's dead. Arguably.
Yep.
Surprise!
Yep.
There's a nice allusion to Gorgon mythology from Greece.
I
You know,
picked up on that too. Yeah.
I thought a lot about,
the Gorgons.
speaking of time, I've been thinking about this movie a lot. Not the movie itself, because I think the movie itself is like kind of forgettable. But It is, it's just my opinion, Joe. That's why we're here. It's doing the ditty.
We get real talk.
No, but
Agree to
like
disagree.
this movie's 20 years old, so maybe the presumption is just we're just a bunch of people are gonna be watching this for the first time, never seen the original. Who gives a shit? Like, I get it.
Well, I think that is a good point. Like,
But
I think
if that's the
maybe
case,
why
but-
John and I are so forgiving. Whereas, you guys, and especially you, Eric, like the original, it's pretty dear to your heart.
But
whereas
if that's
John and I
the
are kind
case,
of like,
though,
eh.
if that's the case, if that's the case, remake it. Don't make me a direct sequel where you're like hinging it on a key character from the first
But
film.
I guess you could argue with this. You almost did remake it.
Well, you did,
Yeah.
but not
Snap!
but not the universe, right? Because the characters of this, those characters still existed.
See, I
don't know.
think I find myself lying on the spectrum of opinions here, closer to Eric than the others. But because I did have a lot of nostalgia wrapped around it. But at the same time, I really got caught up in the excitement of when they made the big surprise reveal that, hey, the woods is going to be Blair Witch. That hit me pretty hard. It's like, oh shit, that's awesome, and it was a surprise, and I was pretty excited for it, and it did allow me to get overhyped in my own head. So I don't know. It's a weird mixture of feelings.
I didn't really have much expectation because the marketing was not great. Like the trailer was fine, but the whole build up was just kind of a wet
That's what
fart.
I'm saying. For me, that marketing blast they did for it, I liked it. And I thought it was fair. Well, obviously, it wasn't very effective looking at the box office from how it came out this weekend. But looking at to me, too, if you look at it logically, we've said before with the hype they built up around the original one, is it real? They tried to, they spoofed us all saying it was a real thing, yada, yada, yada. We bought into it. We said, you can't recreate that in the internet. So they took a different tact and they did this surprise reveal, which I think, of anything, if you're going to try and recreate any of that fervor from the original marketing, that's about as close as you can come to spring it on you.
Well,
Unless you ask J.J. Abrams to do
frankly, I think they were trying to
Yeah.
pull a JJ, and you ain't JJ.
JJ.
Just saying.
There is some of that too.
J.
JJ.
Yank JJ.
JJ.
Okay, stop.
Yada yada over the best part.
But anyway, would you recommend this, Joseph?
I would, yeah. Maybe not
John?
theater, but I would recommend it.
John,
Yeah, I agree with Joe. I would give it a recommend at some point.
how do you not put this out near Halloween?
I mean, aren't we kind
pretty
of?
close to Halloween.
No,
Yeah.
Pumpkin
like,
spice lattes are out in full
In
Yeah,
effect.
they didn't want to go to head to head with Ouija origin of whatever.
Casey.
Or
I mean,
rats.
the spirit of Halloween's open, so
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Casey.
it's officially season. Yes, I would go with that. I would say it's watchable, especially if you get it like Redbox or something. I think would be your best bet.
Andy.
I'm gonna say no unless you're like really into Winger and Barrett.
Yeah,
Winger the band?
I'm with Casey. I think Redbox it. I think like especially if you have any passing interest in Blair Witch, it's like a totally interesting watch in that context for sure. It's not bad if you like found
I think
footage.
like the
for sure.
original is. I think like the original is going to play better in a smaller format than
Eric,
it does
put
on the big
this
screen.
against
Fair.
the sequel.
I
to,
love the sequel. I just watched the sequel 2 weeks ago.
Would you put this higher or lower?
Lower. I like
Like
the,
how?
I like the
Like
sequel
far
more.
lower?
No.
Yeah.
I think it's like the original's way up here, and then the sequel's here, and then this one's like just below that.
I would say that this one could have done with a sexy goth gal
Yeah.
prancing around the forest. Ew.
If only the soundtrack had more corn.
Oh, a little more typo negative.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, that's going to do it for Blair Witch. Let's take a quick break so that we can do some fan mail.
When tombstones topple and coffins creak open, and the deadly, delectable lady in lavender searches for fresh victims, that is the time to see Phantasm, a fiendish undertaking. Oh yes, and it does have a burial plot. Phantasm, if this one doesn't scare you, you're already dead. Phantasm from Avco Embassy Pictures, rated R, under 17, not admitted without parent.
Hi, this is Adrienne Barbeau, and you're listening to Bloody Good Horror.
Send your emails to info@bloodygoodhorror.com or hit us up on Twitter at BGHorror with the hashtag AskBGH. And don't forget to pick up back episodes of the show at podcast.bloodygoodhorror.com.
And we are back.
The Adrian Barbobot.
We're back. Info@bloodygoodhorror.com. First up, Caitlin from Kissimmee, Florida. Kissimmee, Florida.
You kissing me? I kissing you.
Wondering what all of your favorite no apologies horror movies are. It holds a special place in your heart and you don't care what anybody says about it. Mine is Hostel. It was the first movie I snuck into at a theater that checked IDs, and the first time my parents let me drive with a friend as a night out celebration after her being in a horrible accident and in the hospital for a few months. The movie has a special place in my heart and memories. Sorry, this borders on long. Thanks, Caitlin.
Great email, great question, and great story.
Yeah, and very pretty succinct.
Yeah, not long. She doesn't understand how long some of the emails we get are.
I'm drawing a blank though. I really like that Legion movie you guys all hated.
That's not even a horror. I refuse to count that as a horror movie.
We watched it for the show.
I know.
You know
that
what, for
was
me,
during
like,
an embarrassing period.
When I loved slashers as a kid, right? So like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, all that shit, and I like absorbed that. I watched them every week, rented them every week. Like I know those movies front to back. But then when I started like getting on the internet, I realized that there was kind of this like zeitgeist of like, oh, these are the bad ones. Like Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. That one sucks. They're on a boat, blah, blah, blah. And like, I think for years I kind of took over those opinions, were just influenced by them, until I kind of like just woke up one day and was like, I love all of these movies. Like Friday the 13th Part 5 might not have Jason in it, but like structurally is a really awesome slasher, and more people should like it. Like Halloween 3 is one that people have finally come around on, but like Jason Takes Manhattan is the shit and is like one of the best 80s time capsule slashers there is. So like I think I just have over time I've come back around to my own opinions on those. I'm just like, yeah, you know what, they're awesome.
I call it the
Nightmare
Adam Sandler effect, where like you loved Adam Sandler when you were younger, and then you got to a certain age where you're too like cynical to enjoy Adam Sandler. And now I finally reached the age where I'm like, you know what? Like Big Daddy's a pretty good movie.
I don't particularly agree with you on Adam Sandler, but I understand where you're coming from.
You know what I'm getting at, though? Like,
did you watch the Netflix thing, Joe?
I haven't yet, actually. I've had it sitting on the queue. Like,
I watched the Western.
Yeah, that's the one you're talking about, right, John?
Well, there's a new one.
The newer one with David Spade.
Yeah, the do-over. I've been meaning to watch that one.
That one looks better to me than I didn't watch either of them. This is a great question, and I'm like struggling to come up with a good answer because
I sent it out to everybody pre-show, but I forgot.
Well, I see where John's struggling because I have some movies that I know horror movies especially that I know I absolutely love. Don't care what anybody else thinks, but I know there's a lot of people out there that agree with me too, like Poltergeist. I know the younger generation doesn't necessarily like the Poltergeist. I showed it to my daughter. She thought it was kind of boring. I love that movie. It's still one of my favorites.
I don't like Poltergeist.
I think that is a pretty big
I will fucking fight them.
I don't love
it.
it.
I'll go with Eric. Like Jason X is probably one of mine. Like I could watch that movie 100 times.
Hell yeah.
I'm actually gonna get behind the Friday the 13th remake.
Okay, get the fuck
out. Oh my God, Andy! What?
I had a really it's kind of like back
Was
to.
it the first time your parents let you drive a car?
Listen, saying that
I've never driven a car.
Saying that in this crowd is a definition of not caring. Who knows? So I commend your bravery.
I mean, like kind of going back to her story about like it being really personal. Like I went to that movie with like a group of friends. It was fucking packed. It was an enormous theater. There were like 2 police officers standing like at the entrance to that specific like auditorium in the theater.
Doesn't make me feel safe at all.
No.
And like we like all like filed in, the lights dimmed down, and as soon as the lights were down, you heard the crack of countless beers all in the theater, and then you saw like all these like people like start lighting up, and it was just like,
where did you go see this?
Rural Indiana, my friend. And it was just a beautiful, fun time, and I kind of have a soft spot for that movie now.
Cool.
That's
I
a good
do
story
like
too.
whatever
yeah.
your movies are, even if we make fun of them, I do encourage people to, I think I've just found that as I get older, I just don't care what anybody like. I don't.
Yeah,
Somebody was saying
yeah.
like, "Oh, the Blair Witch reviews are bad," and they were like freaking out about it, and I had to sit back and be like, I don't think I've read a review on the internet in maybe 10 years. Like no bullshit.
Eric, we run a
bloodygoodhorror.com.
website.
I watch a movie, I get on this show, and I give my
Eric.
opinion, and that's it, and I'm done.
To
And
go back to Joe's Adam Sandler effect, when those guys from the Netherlands or whatever started that podcast, The Worst Idea Ever, about Grown Ups 2, I was a little bit sad because I really love Grown Ups 1 and 2,
Yeah,
and I
they're
don't
not
care.
Oh God, what? Oh my
I
God.
love those movies.
Yeah, you're in a different universe.
They're enjoyable in like a stupid way. Like
Yes, they
Caitlin-
remind you of you. They remind me of me and my friends. So
I think
that's what it boils down to.
I think
give it like 5 or 6 years, John. You'll get there.
I'm pretty sure Caitlin was trying to break the show up with this question.
Yeah, I
She gets
wish I could think
chocolate
of
wasted, John.
I've talked about Pet Cemetery on the show, I think, in the past, and it's a movie I haven't seen in forever, and I kind of want to go back. I'm like maybe even thinking our next staff fix, we might have to revisit that.
Zelda to this day scares the shit out of me.
Oh
And
yeah,
that's-
it's
it-
fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
It's more that I have like a super soft spot in my heart for that movie, but
Gage is pretty terrifying too.
yeah,
All right.
I don't know if it would stand up.
All right, great question, Caitlin. We got to move on. Next up, Brian wants to know if we'd ever consider reviewing the British miniseries Dead Set.
Nope.
And are you familiar with this? This is
Yes.
basically
Actually,
this is
Joe,
a Big Brother-esque show that
Oh, really?
devolves into
Yes.
zombies attacking and murdering them.
It's on US Netflix now, and Joe and Eric, I highly recommend you guys watch it
Yeah.
because it is literally the setup is literally UK Big Brother. They're all in the house doing the thing. Zombie apocalypse breaks out around the house while the contestants are inside. It's like
pretty
5 or
great.
6 episodes.
It's
It's actually
old.
really good.
I mean, I swear it's like 10 years old at this point.
Dead set. It is fairly. It
Dead
is
Set?
like 10 years old, but it is. They just added it to Netflix. So
So
I would watch that now. Just hearing the description.
that was
It's a
Yeah.
series though, right? It's not a movie.
right.
it's a mini.
It's like 6 or 7 episodes.
It's like a long movie, Joe. Think of it that way.
You guys, I know you two particularly though would love it just because of the Big Brother setup.
Yeah.
info@bloodygoodhorror.com is the email address. We're also on Twitter at BGHorror with the hashtag AskBGH and BGH Classics. Schnars.
Yes.
While,
Are we ready
while
for
Mark is out gallivanting the Mediterranean on his honeymoon, why don't you read us some tweets?
I think John's waiting for the music.
There's no music.
Should I? No music?
Is there music?
All right.
Wait,
Our first.
wait. Were you seriously waiting for music?
No, I was just getting ready to.
That was my callback to the.
No, I
earlier in the
know. I
show.
just for a second I thought Schnars never listened to the show.
So our first one comes from Geeky83. That's Eric Williams. He says, "Have you heard of the Never Hike Alone Kickstarter? It's a big budget Friday the 13th fan film.
Huh.
Hashtag Never Hike Alone.
I have
I
not, but I
haven't.
will check that out.
No, but I have been watching videos of the Friday the 13th multiplayer video game that's going to be released.
That's
Yes.
really good.
It's pretty hardcore.
I mean, I still think we should get it and play it as a crew.
Yeah.
Dude, whoa.
There needs to be a BGH plays before dawn though.
Here's the problem is that we don't all
Or
own the
until
same
dawn.
we don't all own the same console. Casey has a PS4, like I'm pretty much exclusively on PC. Somebody stole Joe's Xbox and Mark has a Mac.
Do we need to be all on the same console?
I'm
Yeah,
sure
probably.
usually do.
I'm sure we do.
That blows. So, quick point on hiking from the movie. The part where they cross the creek.
How did we jump into this?
Well, because they talked about Never Hike Alone, and this it actually just reminded me. I meant to bring this up earlier. So I've only done one serious hike in my life, but it was like a 2-week hike, and like it was pretty hardcore. You do not take your shoes off when you walk through a creek.
No, that's why you buy waterproof boots.
Yeah.
Step 1, don't walk through the fucking creek.
Well, no.
Step
Sometimes you have to
2.
cross creeks. Like,
Step 0, don't go hiking. It's
Step
dumb.
2, turn around, go home, and rent a friggin' hotel room like a smart person.
Yeah.
no, I mean those are all fair arguments. I'm with you, but you don't take your boots off. And if they were like legit hikers, they would have known that. And they like had legit hiking gear.
Yeah, 'cause
Again,
when you're going on a serious hike, that's the one thing you go out of your way to take extra special care of is your feet.
Again,
Also-
I believe the cut was real, but I honestly think everything else was just like witch trickery.
I was gonna say also like there was never any closure on the like she has something in her body.
No, because it's all about making you go insane. So I think it's
Except
really,
for when she pulled the vine out of her
I
leg.
think it's really just psychological stuff.
Okay, all right.
I like
looking
Witch
for
Centipede better.
it. Never hike alone. Hashtag never hike alone.
Witch appeal.
Hashtag never hike.
Lycanthropology at Lycanthropology. That's Alyssa Lynn Gray. She asks, "What would have tempted you most, made you turn around?"
I don't know,
porn
John.
star.
It's like the
I mean, some sort of
biblical
porn
story of that guy who couldn't turn around, and then he did, and he turned into salt. What's that guy's name?
Oh, the guy whose wife's turned into a pillar of salt.
Sure.
Solomon?
Solomon. I think you're right.
I mean, what if you're walking through the house and all of a sudden you just hear, "Hey, Joe, it's Neil Diamond."
Well, no, it's like,
Like, what the fuck?
you know what this reminded me of? It reminded me of that Jeremy Sisto movie where they spend the entire movie telling these people, if you hear your child's voice tell you to open this door in this creepy Indian temple, don't do it. Really, really bad things will happen.
Other
And
side
then-
of the door.
Yeah.
That's not even like an old movie.
But like,
It's
no,
a
no.
recent callback.
But then, and
So
then
you're
the
not talking about Clueless.
and then everybody in the movie immediately does it when somebody asks them to do it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Jeremy Sisko, the thong song.
Yeah.
Eric, one day when your child is speaking to you, you will understand. It would be brutal.
I think if somebody
Yeah.
said, "Hey, there's pizza over here," I would turn around.
Hey, Joe, look over here. What?
And we have
And,
some
well,
beard salve for you.
But here's
oh,
the,
wait, never mind.
here's the thing,
It's not-
Schnars. In this movie, like, you know that person's not behind you. It's the witch.
Yeah,
Like, you
no,
know.
it's
Yeah.
true.
Am I the only person that thought though, as soon as came to the conclusion, don't turn around and look, I would have like pulled my shirt up over my head, like I can't see you.
Well, and also, would the camera using the camera like trick the witch? I don't understand.
Casey-
Apparently, it worked because you saw the Gumby legs run away.
Casey,
Yeah.
so what Casey's saying is he would use the childhood logic of if I can't see it, it can't see me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's fair.
That's not good.
I think that's how witches work.
That's also how John Cena works.
So moving on.
Hey, watch! You see me?
Colin, that's at CM C McSquiggle. God, it's a good handle, but I'm just
I got my
messing-
jean shorts on. You can't see me. Watch.
I'm just trying to power through, Joey, at this point. So Colin asks, does making a joke about how loud and obnoxious your jump scares are make up for how loud and obnoxious your jump scares are?
No, it makes it worse, and it makes it so you should feel worse about it.
I wonder how much of it was done in post. Like,
How-
do you think it was? I mean, and when I say post, I
Honestly,
mean like
I'll be honest with
was
you.
edited like after the
So
fact.
I'll be honest with you, Schnars. Like, we've talked about stuff before, and recently you and I were on the show. I don't even remember what the movie was. We were talking about this idea of like modern joke density and like how comedies now have to have like these rapid fire joke. And I was just thinking like, what if like it was testing and some like suit was like, you know what, this thing needs more jump scares, like when Bagul jumps at the screen. Like, honestly, because it felt out of place in a lot of ways.
It did.
Yeah.
It's what's a little weird about it, but he still has to own it. Like, I'm sorry, you're the director.
What if
and-
what if the witch breaks the fourth wall at the end and jumps up into the audience's face? This is an out there idea. It's never been tried
Witch!
before.
I guess the one way that I would position this is like, I will not hold this against Adam Wingard if his next movie is better.
Okay, yeah,
Is
I mean,
that fair?
this wasn't an awful movie. It just, to me, is not what a Blair Witch sequel should
Yeah,
be.
it didn't turn me off of Wingard at all.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think so either.
Yeah. All right. Moving forward.
It did make
Nick-
me think less of Lionsgate.
Nick Scott, that's at Nick Allman Scott. He says, "Is the future bleak for found footage?"
No, I don't think so.
No.
But I do think that there will be a crossroads where, at some point, it will be revolutionary to do a really raw ass found footage movie that is like rough around the edges. Like, at some point, we're gonna get so refined and like stylized that it's gonna be in some ways like subversive to go back to the original ways and do it more.
The tweens won't want to see it though.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't care what they watch.
I know.
Well, I
Because-
mean, like, let's.
Because-
I mean, like, is Unfriended? Is that the next wave of found footage?
I think Unfriended's good.
I'll go to bat for Unfriended
I
too.
like
I'm
Unfriended,
totally
yeah.
down for it.
No, I
Hashtag
think
raw
found
ass.
footage. I think found footage will only become more ubiquitous as we all have cameras implanted in our corneas and that kind of stuff. So,
But yeah,
John's
Unfriended is
gonna
better in
snarf.
hindsight now that we've watched it because I've gotten over the old man reaction of, is this whole fucking thing on a laptop?
I love that story. I love that story of Casey going to the theater and not knowing it was all going to be on the computer and just getting so angry.
What the fuck?
Joe. Joe almost made me snort, and then almost made me snort a second time. Chris Vincent, that's at SuperVince2000. He says, heads up for Midwesterners, Saturday at Midway DI, which is like a handle, I don't know what that means, equals annual Dusk to Dawn Horror Fest. Halloween, Carrie, Evil Dead, I Drink Your Blood. And then he used the hashtag AskBGH, so it showed up in our feed. Congrats, SuperVince. But no, it sounds interesting. You tricked me into reading your promo.
Fuck.
No, but those are good movies,
All right,
and
Ron
if you can see them
Burgundy.
on the big screen, that's pretty cool. Also, we like Super Vince, so he's a cool dude.
Does look like it's at a drive-in. Sounds fun.
Much better than regular Vince.
He has asked legitimate questions in the past, so I'll allow it this time. Frank, that's at Frank V1313. So with all those time warps and bright lights, is the Blair Witch an alien? I forgot about the bright lights.
There was a part where I was like,
The bright lights were a little out of place.
It was weird.
And there were like dubstep sounds like coming up under the mix. It was like, wah, 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 wah. Yeah.
Yeah, Inception noises.
It was weird.
Yeah.
the witch.
I will answer the question by saying maybe. So, Christ. Jeremy Burgess, that's at free_Burge, says, despite this and then in parentheses perceived slip up, where would you rank Adam Wingard among horror filmmakers of this decade?
You know,
27th.
I don't really know. I don't know that I keep up on it enough, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, call this a slip up though. I guess that's why.
Yeah.
If you are comparing,
if it flopped,
I mean, I don't know that it's a slip up either. But so it's this, You're Next, and The Guest. Like, I'll put that alongside any other horror filmmaker that's working right now.
I think he has made, let's put it this way, I think he has made more good movies than, say, someone like Ty West, but I think that The Sacrament is better than every movie that Wingard has made, and that's just my own personal opinion.
And for me, he gets a bump because the stuff that Wingard's making is at least coming. I'm not necessarily saying this movie, but The Guest and You're Next and whatnot, they're feeling different than a lot of the other stuff that's coming out now. He doesn't feel like a Blumhouse staff director.
I'll tell you what, too, at this point, I would take any of these guys over a James Wan movie any day because they're at least doing interesting stuff and not the same movie over and over.
Do you want to see my movie?
I'll go to bat for Ben Wheatley on the back of Kill List and Sightseers, both of which I fucking loved. So I haven't seen High Rise, which it sounds like is not super horror-y, and I haven't seen A Field in England.
That was the one with Ben Stiller, right? Where they
Yeah.
Nailed it, Joe.
Thanks,
and Wingard's got like a decent amount of other features under his like filmography. Like he did A Horrible Way to Die and like Pop Skull and this other movie called Homesick and a bunch of other shorts too. So
he knows his way around making a movie or something.
He's got a camera.
Again, like let a guy like Adam Wingard make original movies and bring in Ed Sanchez to do this and like Daniel Myrick. Why? I still don't get why he wouldn't do that.
Well, and this is where like I don't know enough about the sort of like production history here. I don't know if you guys have read anything about, like, I don't know if he was like, like Lionsgate came to him and was like, hey, you interested in this, or if he was like vocally advocating.
It's really interesting because Lionsgate, the original Blair Witch was Art is an Entertainment. They also released the sequel, and shortly after that, totally folded. Their entire catalog was purchased by Lionsgate, so Lionsgate's owned this stuff since the early 2000s. And Myrick and Sanchez have had multiple scripts. They've been trying to get it made for a while. I don't think that anything's happened on it for a long time. So, like, I don't know if it's just the amount of money nostalgia stuff is making these days that somebody just went, hey, we own this Blair Witch thing. We should do something with this. Like Paranormal Activity success, maybe, But, like, my guess somebody at Lionsgate was like looking at a balance sheet somewhere and went, hey, let's make one of these fucking movies.
Do we know if Sanchez was approached to do this at all, and maybe turned it down or something?
Well, that's.
I cannot imagine he would have turned it down. But they
especially
did,
to take on a role as executive producer.
Like
on this,
we
right?
mentioned, they did the kind of right thing, and they brought him in as executive producers, and I'm sure they had some kind of consulting on it. I'm sure they got paid, which is good because they should. But I guess the big question is, did Wingard and company pitch this to Lionsgate, or did Lionsgate come up with it and start recruiting young horror filmmakers to do it? I mean, it's hard to know that.
Yeah, it is hard to know many.
I bet if I ever read interviews on the internet, I might be able to learn that. But I don't.
Do you think it would? This is Juicy Cow. That's Mick Carroll at Juicy Cow. Do you think it would have been?
Cow.
Do you think it would have been a better movie without the shaky cam, i.e., filmed normally?
I did have
jump scares were painfully loud.
I did have a thought at some point. Like it might have been cool to just see them do this not found footage. But
I honestly didn't know it was found footage until like a week ago. Like because the original trailer was not obviously found footage.
No, it was not.
You're right.
It was not.
Yeah, but I don't know that they could do they've tried to do a Blair Witch sequel without found footage. It wasn't received well outside of Eric.
I think they were probably just very spooked by what happened with the first sequel, and
which is funny because the first sequel made more money than this one.
Oof.
In its opening weekend.
Opening weekend, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. There was a follow-up so that was actually our last question. Jeremy Burgess, though, at free_Burge, had a actual follow-up that said, I asked because I'm from where he grew up, so I'm biased. I thought Blair Witch was good, but not great. Death Note next year looks killer. So
that's his next project, I guess, is a...
Yeah. I mean, he's got a couple other things lined up, it looked like, so...
Oh, yeah. Him and Simon Barrett are going to be just fine.
He's got a really great sense of style behind the camera.
They'll be fine.
I mean, I loved The Guest. Like, I almost like The Guest more looking back on it. I want to go back and rewatch it than, and I liked it when we watched it the first time. Yes, that's all we got.
All
right. Did you check BGH Classics?
I did not, but I will right now.
Well, John's doing that. There's a really good interview with Wingard and Barrett on The Dissolve, which is now a defunct horror review website that was produced by Pitchfork. But it's a really good interview with both of them about The Guest and where they see themselves as filmmakers and then going forward. And it just seems they seem like they're really intelligent dudes.
I will watch their forthcoming features. Sure. That is for sure. Okay, so attorney, this is a good handle here. At Attorney at Space, that's the Space Lawyers podcast, has a BGH classic here. From the studio that brought you The Devil's Rejects comes Care Bears, and that's at Eric BGH. Had Me Dying, episode 37. That's a deep cut.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like I was on fire even all the way back in episode 37, Schnars.
Did you guys... I wasn't on the previous show, so I'm not sure. Did you cover the one from Whitney Lynn that's catastrophic from episode 200? I'm just going to read it again because it's really good. She says, it's episode 200. Eric asking Joe, can you still read, as he slurred over the Twitter segment. Oh, man.
We did cover that one, but it was worth rehearing.
No, I don't remember that one. I don't think we did.
I probably couldn't at that point.
That's awesome.
Honest.
Hold on. This other one is fucking great too. And I hope you guys didn't cover it because, again, wasn't on the previous show. Episode 30, Eric on Gingers. I don't want to have to wear Ray-Bans when I go to have sex with somebody.
Wow. What episode was that?
Episode 30.
Wow.
Oh my God.
This is why.
That is from at Anton Reemkob.
This is why when I go listen to classics, I don't go to anything sub episode 200.
We played it a little faster and looser back then.
Listen, You come to me when you would like to hear things you said in your mid-20s repeated back to you on the internet.
Oh my God, that is good. Some good
Listen,
BGH classics there.
I
folks.
stand by my comedy workshopping skills still. So
I think for most of us, the perfect explanation for all that is hashtag get a daughter.
Yeah, there you
sure. And as far as the drunk thing, I think that's like the funny thing. If you listen to our whole catalog, which you can do at patreon.com/bloodygoodhorror, but like every single one of us, including like anyone who's ever guessed it, I feel like has had one episode. It's like there are periods where we were all drinking during the show, where like maybe one of us, like we've all had our like ups and downs of when we just went through periods where we like to get a little hammered on the show. Every single one of us has had a show where we lost control of our shit, and you didn't always know listening, but there were episodes where like I know I was like just skating by, just trying to make it to the end without like losing my shit.
There's a spectacular I don't remember finishing.
The spectacular that we did 40s, I was like unbelievably hammered, like to the point where the next day I was like, I can't believe anyone listened to that.
All available on youtube.com/bloodygoodhorror.
Yeah.
Episode 300, I like to describe as a really sloppy work holiday party.
Yeah, episode 300, I got real.
Was that the one, Schnars, where you were like, you stayed late in the Google offices?
Yeah, I was at the office because it was like right after James was born, and I was basically like, I can't do this from the apartment.
You raided the Google fridge, and you were drinking like fancy Google
vodka.
Yeah,
my neighbor. Yeah. So.
I just thought it was hilarious you were rummaging liquor from desks at the office.
Yeah.
It was good times.
All right.
That's what we got, folks.
It's been a long time since Joe was drunk on the show, surprisingly enough, or at least that we knew about it.
Yeah, I've built up quite the tolerance.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Episode 400, I gotta imagine things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even Cece had a wild show.
Oh my
recently.
God, that was one of the funniest I think we've ever had. Like, just annihilated.
Good times. John.
Sir.
Patreon announcements.
Coming soon. An update of a year in Patreon.
Very nice. Also RSS feeds.
Yeah, no one knows what that is.
Okay.
You can check them out. Private RSS for the podcast spinoffs on patreon.com.
While we have Andy on, what's the deal with the next Sophisticult? Or what's going on with Sophisticult right now?
We got to get the rights to watch a movie that the main show might have been covering, but we weren't sure.
When he says get the rights, he means get our permission to do it on Sophisticult.
Yes.
So what was your last? What's your last show on the feed?
The last show on the feed is Childhood of a Leader. That is the debut film by actor turned director Brady Corbett. Very interesting conversation. And then coming up next on Sophisticult, we actually do like throwback picks to something that we're kind of tethering in with the movie. And I am doing a terrible job of not remembering what our throwback pick is for the next time. So you can listen to that episode for free on the main feed and find out.
Very cool. Yeah, so once a month you get one episode of each spinoff free in the feed, and then you get additional episodes on Patreon. So check that out. John, do we have any idea what's next?
We are going to try to see Disappointments Room if it is still available in theaters, but that seems unlikely.
Yeah.
So no, we might have to revisit a something from the catalog for 2016. But we'll definitely circle back to Disappointments Room at some point.
If you have suggestions, hit us up at BG Horror on Twitter. Obviously, like, we're coming into year-end stuff right now. Like, not now, but pretty close. So if there's something like you think we missed throughout the year, hit us up, because we want to start getting that list rocking so that we can start banging those out now before we're like binge watching in the beginning of December. So hit us up at BG Horror on Twitter. That's gonna do it. What, Joe?
Real quick, we got BG Horror on Twitter. We're on the Snapchats at BG Horror also, and Instagram Bloody Good Horror. And you can find us on Facebook if you search for Bloody Good Horror. We're everywhere.
Yeah, kick ass.
Instamatic will be back soon too. I'll be covering 13 Assassins with Freddie Morris from Night of the Living podcast.
Nice, Instamatic comeback. I like it.
And then we'll be getting in there and mixing it up, and with the look, since a lot of the content's turned over now. So
very cool. All right, that's gonna do it, guys, for the Blair Witch. Hope you enjoy the show. We'll talk to you soon.
See you.
Andy.
I thought I was last. Farewell.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.